Good morning, everyone. Welcome to JSPS USJI Risk Management Symposium from Natural Disaster to Economy. Firstly, it is my great pleasure to ask Ambassador Fujisaki, Ambassador of Japan to the United States of America, to say opening remarks for the symposium. どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me today. It's already 1 year from the great disaster, 3/11. I'm often asked by American people how the Japanese are thinking, and I have to say that some people think that we have made a huge progress. Some people say that we haven't. Some people say that it's a long time ago. Some people say it's only yesterday. So it's very varied. It depends on people how much have personally suffered. So I would have to say that we have been helped a lot. So we are on the recovery road. But as for the psychology of people, it's very difficult to sum it up. Two things I can say is that, as I have said, we are on the recovery road. And the second thing is that this was not possible without your assistance. Being helped greatly by American people, forces, government, companies, students, churches, all the people, they were really great in extending help to us. So, without your assistance, this road to recovery was not possible. And I always say that Japanese people will never forget your friendship. It's from the bottom of our heart. The Japanese people say, "Arigatou gozaimasu." Thank you very much. As for this kind of natural disaster, I always have been thinking, for peace are important. The first P is P for prediction. However, this, I have to say, is not perfect. There are varied views. So we cannot really depend 100% on prediction. Second P is for preparation, preparedness. This is most important. And it has to have imagination and study of history. I have to say that from that point, we had not been 100% as well, looking back at what we have experienced. Third P is, of course, prompt response at the disaster. We are now reviewing in private, government, in the Japanese Diet, how we have reacted. Was it really prompt enough? Was it precise enough? Have we taken the bold measures? I cannot say it because it is still under review. But this prompt responsiveness is important. The fourth is, of course, post-incident review. As I said, we are now doing this in Diet and government and private as well. Without these post-crisis review, we may experience the same thing. So this kind of symposium is so important in trying to draw lessons. We have to share the lessons with all other countries as our duty, because you have helped us. We have to be transparent and so that everyone can draw lessons from us about earthquake, about tsunami, and about nuclear accidents. So I would commend JSPS and USJI for organizing this session, and again, thank you very much. I would look upon the very good discussion here. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。Thank you very much, Ambassador Fujisaki. Next, I'd like to ask Dr. Sugawara, Hirotaka Sugawara, Director of Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, Washington office, to say welcome address.
Welcome to the third JSPS Winter Forum Risk Management. Not the risk management, third JSPS Winter Forum. We usually have two forums, summer JSPS forum, which will be held usually by itself, by JSPS, and we hold a winter JSPS forum with some other agencies. First one was with AAAS. It was about nuclear disarmament. And the second one was with NIH and Johns Hopkins University. That was on the immune, not immune, it was about aging and the IP cell. This is the third one, and we are going to have this together with the USJI. USJI is in particular responsible for the economic disaster part. For this symposium, we choose this theme of natural disaster and technology-related disaster and economic crisis. To understand the nature of the crisis and how the risk should be managed. Disaster crisis or crisis 1, 2, 3, although they look very different, but they seem to have common characteristics. First, they cannot be avoided, or maybe except for the two technology-related disaster like nuclear disaster, oil spill in the Gulf. They cannot be predicted. I know a lot of people, experts, work on these predictions, but the nature of the crisis or disaster is such that it cannot be predicted. But as the ambassador told us just now, they can be prepared. We have to do all sorts of things to get prepared. Here I'll point out some examples of natural disaster first. US experienced a very large scale natural disaster in August 2005. That's Hurricane Katrina. Death toll was 1,204, and damage was estimated to be around 40 billion. The direct damage, excluding damage to the future agriculture, fishery, oil industry. Those are still excluded. We experienced about a year ago, 2 days from now, March 11, 2011. It's called Higashi Nihon, East Japan earthquake. Death toll here is 15,848, official counting. still missing 3,305. Damage again is roughly estimated to be 200 billion US dollars. These are two examples. The second technology-related disaster, US also experienced a very similar one to ours. That's oil spill in Gulf. That was experienced in 2010. Japan, right after this earthquake, had a nuclear disaster. So it's March 2011. We also, US and Japan, have common kind of crisis, which is the economic crisis. US experienced that in 2008. Japan experienced this early in 1900, and the Europeans are still experiencing in the middle of crisis. Now, here I start showing some photos. Now, this photo, you might think this is the photo of tsunami, but actually this is not. This is the picture of the state of Mississippi. It's now the town name is Gulfport, and that house is actually, it's not a house, it's a casino boat. Now you see, it's very similar to photos I will show immediately. The point is, you see the coastlines, and you see there is no protection whatsoever. Although the Gulf must have experienced a large number of hurricanes, they are still under no protection. Now I'll show some photos, which is from Uriage. It's a district of city of Sendai. Sendai is my hometown. I went there early April, right after the earthquake. And the place is located between the city center of Sendai and the Sendai airport. The airport was very quickly recovered by the American Air Force, American military, not just Air Force, but Navy and so on. And I went there by using freeway, and the Uriage district is between the city center and the airport. And this is one picture I took right after the tsunami. And there are lots of houses, cars, and boats, and everything mixed up. Actually, this is about 2 kilometers away from the coast. At that time, I couldn't get into the hardest hit area where people were still searching for the victims. This is the other side of the freeway, not seashore side, but the other side. And I found that this area is not hit at all. They're living in a quite normal life. So I learned that this highway stopped tsunami completely. This is the kind of lesson we should learn. In this sort of area, at least, freeway can stop tsunami. This is the hardest hit area taken December. I couldn't get in there right after the great tsunami. I could get in December. All the debris were gone. This is a sort of the center of the town. All kinds of shops were there. I used to be there, but not anymore. But what I found was I went back to the about 1 or 2 kilometers away from the coast. There were still boats. No one was working to get rid of them. Anyway, I'll show you about a 5 minutes movie. This is not Sendai, but it is a scene of small town. It's called Minami Sanriku Machi. It's my mother's hometown. I didn't take it. Somebody took it at the time of the tsunami. It's so. Okay. Oh. I should touch it. Oh. I did that. Technical disaster. Good. This is the town of Minami Sanriku. So town of Minami Sanrik disappeared. The population of the town at the time of tsunami was 17,666. The household was 5,362. The casualties are the following. Total deaths and missing 875. Destroyed houses, demolished or half demolished, 3,311, about 60%. And it's now in the recovery process, and makeshift houses is now about 2,000. Now I want to introduce you to some simple facts for the sake of your understanding of the next speaker is the scale of magnitude. The earthquake is counted measured by its energy. Energy in joule, for example. US energy consumption per year is 5 times 10 to the 19 joule, which is, in a way, you can say it's 500 gigawatt times 10 to the 8. That's 10 to the 8 is a second in for a year. 500 gigawatt, about one power station, about 1 gigawatt. So in US, there are about 500 power stations. Magnitude, earthquake magnitude is measured by a unit called magnitude. And the energy is, in this case, 10 to the 1.5 times n megajoule. So if n is 9, it means that it's 10 to the, approximately 10 to the 20 joule. And that is the magnitude of Tohoku earthquake. And so it's about a little bit more than US consumption and total consumption per year. But this energy comes to the, in the case of earthquake, it's within a minute or so. So that's the scale. And the difference in magnitude, one difference is about 30 times. So Los Angeles had magnitude 6, which is 10 to the 15 joule. That was in 2008. The tsunami, this is again a very introductory remark. Velocity is square root of gravity constant times the depth of the ocean. So if its depth is 1,000 meters, the speed is 360 kilometers per hour. The point is, the energy and momentum usually are conserved with certain dissipation, but to maintain this depth, if depth becomes shallower and shallower, to compensate this, the height of the wave becomes very, very large. It becomes higher. You just saw this Minami Sanriku tsunami. It gets higher and higher when it became shallower and shallower. We have this data of the earthquakes. This is the large earthquakes of this last century, including this one in year 2011. But what I can learn from this is that magnitude, well, the biggest one was the Chile one in 1960, Higashi Nihon tsunami, this is magnitude 9.0. I want to point out is there is no earthquake of magnitude 10, for example. There is a good physical reason that it can't be over magnitude 10. And this means that we have to be prepared. And I can say that all these are along the Pacific Rim, west coast of the United States, Canada, or Japan, Taiwan, Indonesia, that area. So, if you want to prepare for the worst case, you have to be prepared for at most magnitude 10. Fukushima nuclear disaster followed this earthquake March 11. And the government of Japan had the data on this at a very early stage. It's called, we have a software called SPEEDY. SPEEDY data on the radioactive fallout for Fukushima reactors were available. And I belong to the National High Energy Physics Accelerator Organization, and we also measured it. I will show you the data. This is the data taken by SPEEDY, and this is the accumulated fallout. And let me put out one thing here. This is the inner circle is 20 kilometers, outer circle is 30 kilometers, and you see this funny shape, largest shape. This area is this is March 11 to March the 24th. The largest one is 100 millisievert accumulated 100 millisievert area, which is dangerous because it's for the child, 1-year child. So this is the sort of data given by SPEEDY, and the point is, next is very similar one, but this is from March to April 24. You see, there is not much change, which means there was a fallout at the very beginning, but not like later time. This is the measurement done in KEK. Now, there was a peak of the radiation dose right after the earthquake, right after the tsunami. But since that time, there is no increase. This curve fits the assumption that the decay curve of cesium-137. So it was only one time fallout from possibly from the hydrogen explosion. So these data show the government of Japan has rather accurate data from the very early stage on the radioactive fallout from Fukushima reactors, at least next. Ministry of Education. METI is in charge of nuclear industry. I don't know what's the relation between these two ministries. The fallout is mostly due to hydrogen explosion. The Japanese government did not make SPEEDY data public, which caused a lot of confusion. This indication, inaction by the government was blamed to have caused unnecessary confusion and suspicion towards the government of Japan. Now, what was the foreign reaction at that time? I saw some newspaper article published in January of this year. This is from Kyodo News. You can see it here. The science minister next provided data on the radioactive fallout to U.S. forces a few days after the crisis erupted at the Fukushima #1 nuclear plant. Far earlier than the public was informed. Actually, the public was informed March the 23rd. So this was a little, well, according to this paper, it says far earlier than the public was informed. And then so we should say. This is the, and well, I should be blunt about it. I don't think the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission behaved properly. This is the article in the Science magazine, internet version. This is too small, so I read part of it. The advice, the American advice is for Americans to get away within the 50 miles, that's 80 kilometers from the center of the Fukushima reactor. This advice conflicted with the safety perimeter of 30 kilometers. That Japanese government probably depended on speedy established Japanese government, and drew harsh criticism from a Japanese science policy analyst attending the forum. That's myself. I asked JASCO about it. JASCO said that the NRC definition of the danger zone was based on an analysis of the status of the Fukushima reactors and presented a conservative estimate of the risk from the radioactivity. It was meant to be a recommendation for US citizens, not Japanese citizens, he said, adding that there were dialogues with Japanese authorities before the recommendation was issued. I really want to know what sort of dialogue they had, the NRC and Japanese government. I still don't know. And I don't think US citizens have 3 times more sensitive body to the radioactivity. So it caused a lot of confusion. And what I said was it caused confusion, and that's true. And Japanese citizens started to doubt what the Japanese government was doing. Of course, that was not just the similar reason that Japanese citizens started to doubt about the ability of the Japanese government. Anyway, I want to show some. It's not my role to criticize Japanese government, so I want to stay away from that. I want to show, as a scientist, what the current status of reactor fuel is, not reactor fuels. I see that there's no China syndrome, at least now. Sizable amount still is inside the pressure vessel. The reactor 1 probably has not much inside the pressure vessel, but I'm pretty sure it's in a containment vessel. Reactor 2 and 3, a good amount is still in inside the pressure vessel, 60 to 90%. Meltdown has occurred in all 3, at least partly. This is the temperature data given by TEPCO to us. And based on this data, we could analyze the status of the fuel. This is a fit of the temperature of in this case, this is reactor number 3. And the fitting shows that this sort of a temperature profile can be only understood if a sizable amount of fuel is still in pressure vessel. In this particular case, 60% of the fuel is still in the pressure vessel. I don't know anything about economic crisis, but it seems that according to Paul Krugman, a famous economist, the return of depression economics, he wrote this book recently, and he explained that inability of recession, just like an earthquake, is inevitable. He takes a very simple model called the Capitol Hill babysitting co-op model. If I summarize it very quickly, people start to collect coupon for babysitting. That's money. When they see not much coupon is available in the market, less and less money in the market, and that creates the crisis. So I want to ask economists the following question. Is Japanese depression coming in a few years? That's my question. As an amateur investor, I want to know this. My financial advisor tells me that I should sell my Japanese government bond. Now, that means that he's a bank employee, so the bank must be deciding that something will happen in a couple of years. So if banks start selling bonds, and if I say that I got this advice, let's all sell our government bond, can we avoid this sort of crisis? And I know some people argue that it will not come. I don't think at least these three arguments they're giving us correct. Japanese government bonds are owned mostly by Japanese, and the Japanese savings are more than 17 trillion US dollars. This fiscal deficit is substantially lower than the MOF value and so forth. They give us all these arguments, but as the amateur investor, I can't trust these arguments. So I want to know the answers. Enjoy the forum.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sugawara. And now we'd like to start morning sessions.
I have to introduce.
Yes, yeah.
I have to introduce two distinguished scientists as our keynote speakers. First is Professor Arima. His career is described on page 6 of this booklet, so please read it. I just want to mention that my personal relation to him. He was my nuclear physics teacher when I was a graduate student, undergraduate student in the University of Tokyo, and he was also a colleague when I spent a short time in the University of Tokyo. And the second keynote speaker is Professor Frank Hippel. Again, his career is described on page 8 of this book. Again, I want to mention my personal relation to him. When I first came to the United States as a postdoc, I went to Cornell. That's where he was. And we published 2 or 3 papers together. And one was on nuclear physics. And after this, of course, he is now very influential prominent researchers and advisor on the nuclear disarmament and that sort of thing. So first, Professor Arima.
I don't do this. You can. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I wish to thank organizers, particularly Dr. Hirotaka Sugawara, for inviting me to this nice symposium, although I don't know anything about risk management, except my wrong path. Always I have trouble in my bank and etc. And we approach the 1-year anniversary of Tohoku earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear crisis. I take this opportunity to extend my sincere gratitude to the United States of America for the assistance provided to Japan during the tremendously challenging and tragic time. In particular, I wish to single out the help in dealing with the accident at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. On a number of levels, I express my heartfelt appreciation for the efforts of the NRC team, which was dispatched to assist their counterpart regulatory authority in Japan in the implementation of their activities. Our thoughts and prayers go out to those who suffered in this catastrophe. we sincerely hope that they can continue to find the strength and outrage to deal with unimaginable situation. The statistics are staggering. 16,000 people perished. Over 3,000 people remain unaccounted for. However, there have been no report of death as a result of radioactive fallout from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. In excess of 370 homes were either completely or partially damaged, destroyed. Within a 300 kilometer radius of the quake, coastal banks up to the approximately 190 kilometer away in Iwate, Miyagi, and Fukushima prefectures are either partially or completely destroyed. All 258 fishing ports in this region suffered catastrophic damage. The area of arable land that incurred the damage is estimated at approximately 25,000 hectares. Fires broke out in 2 oil refineries, power facilities, including 4 nuclear power plants and 12 thermal power plants were damaged. Power outrage impacted 8,710,000 homes served by Tohoku Electric Power and Tokyo Electric Power. The estimated cost of this disaster will be on the order of 169 billion yen, a figure equivalent to upward of 18% of Japan's budget. The disaster was characterized by the breadth its damage and by the enormous destruction inflicted upon coastal areas. 15 of Japan's 54 commercial nuclear reactors lie in this region. 14 suffered major damage as a result of tsunami, and the situation at the 3 reactors of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was very seriously due to the damage to their reactor cores, as Sugawara mentioned. Today I will speak about the accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, hereafter Daiichi plant, and present what I hope are the lessons learned from the disasters in terms of risk management. This shows the location of epicenter of the earthquake. Next one, this shows the location of nuclear power station in Tohoku district. Before discussing the Daiichi plant accident, I would like to mention the criticality accident that occurred on September 30, 1999 at the JCO nuclear fuel processing plant in Tokaimura. At that time, I was serving as both the Minister of Education and the Director General of the Science and Technology Agency, which was responsible for the overseeing the safety regulations of this facility. This accident occurred when the operating company breached safety regulation laws by introducing a large quantity of uranium solution into the precipitation tank. Tragically, two of workers who performed this task died from radiation exposure. The criticality remained in the precipitation tank following the accident, and nearby residents were evacuated. The criticality state was stopped some 20 hours later by draining the water from within the exterior cooling jacket of the precipitation tank. I am convinced the reason this accident was resolved and the pandemonium avoided was due to the cooperative efforts of the related entities. Following the accident, the special law on nuclear disaster countermeasures was enacted. I am anxiously awaiting the outcomes of the upcoming investigation into this law of this special countermeasure law in respect to the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Now I wish to go to next subject, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant accident. On March 11, 2011, the protective infrastructure of Daiichi plant maintained by the Tokyo Electric Power Company, hereafter TEPCO, was struck by a Tohoku Pacific Ocean earthquake and an accompanying tsunami. The earthquake was the magnitude 9 and the tsunami was measured in excess of 15 meters. This next slide shows the location of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station and the Fukushima Daini nuclear power station. It is necessary to mention that Daiichi infrastructure was designed to withstand a tsunami of a maximum height of 5-7 meters. The plant is comprised of 6 separate nuclear reactors. At the time of quake, reactors 1, 2, and 3 were in operation, while reactor 4, 5, and 6 were undergoing scheduled maintenance. Notably, reactor 4 was completely defused, and the fuel was already removed to the spent fuel pool. Reactors 1, 2, and 3 went into automatic shutdown following the earthquakes. The earthquake and tsunami, however, caused loss of all off-site power supplies and almost all on-site power supplied by the emergency diesel generators. In turn, this prevented the reactors and the spent fuel pool from cooling and triggered a core nuclear meltdown in reactors 1, 2, and 3. Due to the damage to the reactor cores, a large amount of hydrogen built up within the buildings surrounding reactors 1, to and fro and exploded. A two-step cooling procedures to achieve the cold shutdown state in reactor 1, 2, and 3 was performed. Next slide, please. Last December 16th, it was announced that this cold shutdown state was reached. Now the removable of fuel from the spent fuel pool and from the reactors will be undertaken. However, even with advances in research and technology, the decommissioning of the Daiichi plant is expected to take 30 or 40 years. A large quantity of radioactive material was emitted from the plant and necessitate the designation of a no-go zone with a 20-kilometer radius around the power plant. Additionally, some areas outside this 20-kilometer radius range were designated as potential exclusion zones. The accident forced the evacuation of 110,000 people. Many of these people remain in evacuation shelters. In addition, the decontamination initiative has been undertaken to deal with the radioactive contamination across this vast area. This slide shows the results of airborne monitoring made by Japanese Ministry of Education and USJI. This next slide shows the protected area set in the area of Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station. There are several aspects particular to the Daiichi accident, thus setting it apart from the JCO accident and accidents at 3 Miles Island and Chernobyl. Number one, the earthquake and tsunami caused significant damage to basic infrastructure, including transportation, communications, and instrumentation. The second, core meltdown occurred. The third, accidents occurred simultaneously in a plurality of nuclear reactors. Number four, next slide please. Hydrogen explosion occurred. Number five, the accident occurred over an extended period of time. Number six, a large quantity of radioactive materials was released into surrounding area. The difficulty in getting all related parties to cooperate in dealing with the accident at Daiichi in a manner similar to the JCO accident was unavoidable given the magnitude of the accident and these various aspects previously mentioned. However, as I will outline in the points below, other factors proved hindrance to the establishment of the required cooperation between the responsible parties. Number one, inadequate coordination between the central and the local disaster countermeasures headquarters. The second, insufficient numbers of experts and experienced personnel mobilized at the early stage. The third, inadequate coordination between the Cabinet Secretariat, Cabinet Office, and the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. Despite the situation I have described, employees and the personnel of TEPCO and the power plant risked their lives in incredibly harsh conditions to deal with the accident. Their unrelenting efforts brought about a conclusion to this catastrophe. I commend all the technicians involved in these tasks for their resolve and commitment to completing an operations carried out under the most difficult conditions imaginable and described in any training, not described in any training manual, and which prevented worst case scenario. The magnitude 9 Tohoku Pacific Ocean earthquakes is the strongest ever recorded in Japan, while the maximum response acceleration for the standard seismic ground motion of the order of 438 to 489 gulls was adopted in the earthquake resistant design of the Daiichi plant. The range of maximum acceleration observed during the quake was between 310 and 580 gulls. The maximum response acceleration was exceeded in reactors 2, 3, and 5. However, luckily, additional allowance, the earthquake resistance design meant the damage to the Daiichi plant went unconfirmed, and fundamental integrity of the facility was initially thought to have been maintained. So without a tsunami, everything was okay. As previously mentioned, it has been established that the cause of the nuclear accident was the tsunami. It is instructive to look back at the Jogan tsunami that hit the northeastern coastal region over 1,100 years ago in 869. The first paper regarding sedimentation study of this tsunami, which was carried out on the Sendai Plain, was published in 1990. There are various papers about the magnitude 8.9 Jogan earthquake, including one published in 2010, and even more extensive sedimentation study conducted by the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology. Additionally, in 2002, the National Headquarters for Earthquake Research Promotion issued long-term predictions of the likelihood that an earthquake could occur anywhere in the region from northern coast of Sanriku to the Boso offshore trough. Aware of this situation, TEPCO requested the Japanese Society of Civil Engineers to undertake a study into the likelihood of the tsunami occurring in Fukushima. Before those studies, nobody thought Fukushima area would have such high tsunami. The results of this study were to be published in October 2012, this year, too late. In addition, the headquarters for earthquake research promotion had been planning in November 2011, after the tsunami, to amend their long-term earthquake prediction on the basis of updated information regarding the Sanriku offshore area. Given this and the recommendation for further studies based on additional knowledge acquired regarding the Jogan tsunami, it was apparent that this region was on the brink of suffering an earthquake that could produce such a destructive tsunami. But prediction was too late. Every time this happens, after big disaster earthquake, many scholars said, we know. Too late. They should tell us before that accident. At the Onagawa nuclear power plant, maintained by the Tohoku Electric Power Company and located closest to the quake epicenter, adequate tsunami countermeasures involving the use of seawater pumps to assess tsunami conditions were adopted, luckily. Thankfully, an accident at this plant was avoided. While it has been suggested that tsunami countermeasures adopted at Daiichi plant failed to consider the Jogan tsunami. However, we should understand that investigations carried out regarding the Jogan tsunami have been incomplete. However, comparing TEPCO's tsunami countermeasures with the tsunami countermeasures implemented at Onagawa plant by the Tohoku Electric Power Company, I hesitate to suggest that adequate measures were adopted to deal with the situation at the Daiichi plant. Why Onagawa succeeded to avoid this tsunami? I think this is due to legend in this village. All the people said they will have a high tsunami. So the technicians or the engineers in Onagawa listened to those saying. But in the Fukushima area, there was no such person to warn the Tokyo Electric Company. Hydrogen explosions. The hydrogen explosions within the nuclear reactor buildings aggravated the situation. Under normal operating conditions, hydrogen is formed as a result of the radiation decomposition of the cooling water. During a severe accident, hydrogen is produced by zirconium-water reaction. Unfortunately, despite a demand for strict measures for preventing hydrogen explosions, the countermeasures for dealing with the building up of hydrogen in the reactor buildings were lacking. Now I have to go to SPEEDY, as Professor Sugawara mentioned what is SPEEDY already. SPEEDY is based on emissions, sources information of radioactive material at the time of an accident and incorporates real-time meteorological information to predict the dispersion of radioactivities. In this instance, damage and destruction of the plants, instrumentation equipment meant that no source emission information could be obtained. Although calculations based on the range of assumptions, including an assumption of the unit of emitted radiation with respect to the emission source, were performed by related agencies, namely Ministry of Education. These were not used to assist in determining the procedure for evacuating residents of the surrounding area. In addition, the results obtained using SPEEDY were not made public during the initial stage of the accident, as Professor Sugawara mentioned. If source emission information had been obtained, SPEEDY would probably have been used to assist in dealing with the accident. That is thought to be the reason why the information was not made public. However, it is hard to dismiss the notion that it is overestimating matters to believe that emission source information is likely to be accurately obtained during the severe accident. I believe there have been an excessive expectation in this regard. The action plan must be reviewed to ensure the establishment of the system that functions even during the most severe accident. Now I wish to go to useful lessons for the future from the aspect of risk management. Japan's safety standards and emergency countermeasures for nuclear power plants have been sufficiently strict regarding earthquakes. In contrast, standards and countermeasures are lacking with regard to tsunami. Most nuclear power facilities worldwide make use of seawater or river water as a final heat sink. Therefore, there is a need for more thorough preparation against tsunami and flooding, keeping in mind their frequencies, recurrence period, and estimated scale. This natural disaster revealed the weakness of nuclear power plant in Japan. Although the utilization of PSA is an effective method for decreasing the risk at nuclear facilities, as we have not made the best use of it in Japan, unfortunately. Furthermore, PSA has not been utilized at all in assessing tsunami risk. Most certainly, we need to accurately assess the weak points and risks at facilities with a more effective use of PSA, and to take strict and adequate measures based on this method. Organization and the system are critical components in the risk management. We need the organization that can promptly assemble experts of the nuclear power generation so that their knowledge may be utilized to manage an accident. Additionally, we need a system which coordinates the efforts of experts and executive administrators so that appropriate measures such as evacuation may be implemented. Nuclear power plant security is not maintained solely on the basis of nuclear engineering. Wide range of engineering-related knowledge is required, including disaster prevention engineering against earthquake and tsunami, explosives safety engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, civil engineering, and architectural engineering. However, the extent to which such expertise has been integrated and utilized has been inadequate. We must establish system for improving safety standards based on contributions from all the relevant studies. Finally, I wish to reiterate the importance of advances in research. Scientific research into natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis, along with predictive research of such disasters, must be promoted and accelerated. On the basis of this research, we can then advance studies in the disaster preventing engineering. Nuclear power safety research is also an issue, and I admit I am concerned about the lack of eagerness or proactive approaches that were clearly observed in the initial stage of nuclear power development in Japan. Basic nuclear safety rests on continuous and accumulated research endeavors. I believe we have to rethink the research agendas for improving safety in the aspect of natural diseases, severe accidents, and PSA. Furthermore, we must be willing to cooperate on the international level, as a solution may lie beyond the visions of local or national experts. Now I have to go to conclusion. Through intellect and commitment, gradual advancement in nuclear power has been achieved over the past decades. The depletion of fossil fuel and the need to resolve the tandem issues of increased energy demand and the contribution of man-made carbon dioxide emissions to global warming necessitate the utilization of renewable energies as well as nuclear power. First of all, we must accumulate knowledge and wisdom to bring the accident at Daiichi plant under control. We believe we have a responsibility to our predecessors and the responsibility to the future generations to continue to achieve further advancement in nuclear power. Of great significance are the additional problems associated with the decommissioning of nuclear reactors and nuclear waste, namely back-end technology. Finland and Sweden are the only two countries with established final disposal site of nuclear waste. Research and development of back-end technologies is an issue that is shared by both proponents and opponents of nuclear power. It is an issue that doesn't merely demand the world's attention, but rather necessitate constructive engagement, commitment, and cooperation on the international level. We must find a much better way to solve back-end problems. Thank you very much for your kind attention and for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you.
Arima. Next keynote speaker is Dr. Frank von Hippel.
Thank you very much. There will be additional discussion this afternoon of the safety lessons we learned from the Fukushima accident. But there's a much broader review of nuclear energy policy going on in Japan at the moment, and I'm going to talk about the fuel cycle. In fact, this month there will be published studies being made by the Japan Atomic Energy Commission and also by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, on the fuel cycle issues, which will then are to lead to a decision by the cabinet in July, perhaps, on whether there are to be any changes in Japan's fuel cycle policy. And of course, the fuel cycle policy is very closely related to the issue of the back end of the fuel cycle that was just mentioned. This is of international interest because of the linkages between the fuel cycle and nuclear weapons proliferation. We right now are intensively discussing the Iran's fuel cycle choices. And the reason is the fuel cycle is specifically enrichment, uranium enrichment, and reprocessing are dual-purpose technologies. They were originally developed to produce material during World War II to produce material for the nuclear weapons. As a result of the now 10-year-old crisis over Iran's enrichment program, we saw in 2002 Mohammed El-Baradei, then the Director General of the IAEA, proposed a return to a near return to an old idea that was put forward in the Atchison-Lilienfeld Plan in 1946, that there should be no purely national enrichment or reprocessing plants. And in fact, this idea of internationalizing enrichment and reprocessing plants is currently a subject of active discussion in Japan. I will talk about reprocessing though, because in the case of reprocessing, that is plutonium separation from spent fuel, you don't have to, it's not necessary at all to the current generation of nuclear power plants. And therefore, an alternative to internationalizing reprocessing is to not do it. It was expected that all countries with nuclear power plants would have to reprocess or have access to reprocessing services. That was expected in the 1960s and 70s when it was thought that there was not enough uranium in the world to support the current generation of reactors for very long, and that if nuclear power was to become a major energy source, it would be necessary to deploy much more uranium-efficient reactors, namely, and the reactor that was focused on was the plutonium breeder reactor. And it was expected that in the 60s and 70s, it was expected that by today we would have thousands of these reactors deployed. But we only have one operating breeder reactor in the world in Russia. And there is, Japan has a prototype breeder reactor, which has not operated since 1994. And so the question is, nevertheless, in preparation for the deployment of such reactors, a number of countries embarked on reprocessing, and a number of countries are still reprocessing on a large scale due to bureaucratic inertia. And those countries are France, Japan, and the UK. The UK has recently decided that it will finally terminate its reprocessing program. In France, there is no such reconsideration under the current government, but it is possible that the result of the election in May in France will result in the bringing to power of a coalition which is more interested in questioning that policy. But the focus here now is on Japan. Just to give you, to make clear why reprocessing is of concern and in terms of making plutonium available for possible weapons use. I show on the left here the situation that we have if spent fuel is not reprocessed. Typical pressurized water assembly contains about 1% plutonium, and so about 5 kilograms. But it is mixed in with fission products, especially after 10 years, the fission product that has contaminated the area around the Fukushima Daiichi reactor, the cesium-137, which has a 30-year half-life. And as a result of that radiation, the gamma radiation coming from those fission products, even 50 years after discharge of a fuel assembly, if you stood within a meter of such an unshielded fuel assembly, you would get a lethal dose within a half an hour. So it's very difficult. That makes the plutonium in a fuel assembly quite inaccessible, and in order to get at it, you need a reprocessing plant. So if you don't have a reprocessing plant, it's pretty inaccessible. Contrast that situation with the situation on the right hand, which is a picture taken during a visit I made almost 20 years ago to Russia's small pilot reprocessing plant, where you see a worker sort of day after day, year after year, handling separated plutonium, and the concern, the main concern, there's very little gamma radiation, neutron radiation coming out of the plutonium, which is in that can. The concern is it's in a powder form, and if it was inhaled, it would be very dangerous. And so he's putting one canister inside a second canister to make sure that there's no leakage of plutonium oxide. But each of those cans contains about 2.5 kilograms of plutonium, and if you took, and we should remember that the Nagasaki bomb contained 6 kilograms. So 2 or 3 of those cans is a weapons equivalent. And then when I visited this facility, there were 12,000 such cans stored in a simple warehouse, and there are more there today. So that's of great concern. Plutonium is a weapons usable material, and to have it so accessible, to have it made more accessible by reprocessing is an international concern. And this isn't just a theoretical concern. In the 1960s, the US promoted reprocessing worldwide because of the expectation that it would be of breeder reactors, which would require reprocessing, and in fact, the chairman of our Atomic Energy Commission for the decade of the 1960s, Glenn Seaborg, talked about a plutonium economy in which plutonium would be the fuel of the future, and it would be sort of a measure of value instead of gold, which I guess we were still on the gold standard. So one of the countries that we encouraged to engage and to master the technology of reprocessing was India, under the Atoms for Peace program. But India in 1974 used the first plutonium separated with our assistance for what they called a peaceful nuclear explosion, which later then led to the Indian nuclear weapons program. So the U.S. started to rethink its policy about promoting reprocessing at that point. And we also learned, looking around the world at that point, that several countries were trying to obtain reprocessing plants. And we later learned that was all in the context of secret nuclear weapons programs. So the U.S. policy became one of trying to discourage. I mean, the U.S. policy became one of saying to the world that we don't reprocess and we don't encourage reprocessing, although we respected especially in Japan and Europe, their decisions to reprocess. But in fact, for reasons that I'll explain, because it's costly, because it's not necessary, reprocessing has fading out. And today, Japan is the only non-weapon state that reprocesses. It is considered, there's no intention in the part of Japan to convert it. It has domestically enough separated plutonium for about 1,000 nuclear weapons if it wanted to make them. There's no intention to do so, but it is considered a virtual nuclear weapon state by its neighbors. And South Korea is currently, it has to renew its agreement of cooperation with the United States in 2013. And there have been very difficult negotiations going on with South Korea because it has been demanding the U.S. agreement in the context of this agreement of cooperation that South Korea would have the same rights as Japan to reprocess. And this is became, I mean, there is a faction in South Korea which would like to have a nuclear weapons option, like Japan has, and especially since the May 2009 nuclear test of North Korea, there's been a call for that South Korea should have nuclear sovereignty, like Japan has. Well, this is the situation with regard to separated plutonium in the world. It's a legacy of two programs. One is the Cold War program with the Soviet Union and the United States having produced a huge amount of plutonium for tens of thousands of nuclear weapons. It is a measure of the number over here on the left, equivalent of 10,000 nuclear weapons, depending on whether you assume that a nuclear weapon contains 4 or 8 kilograms of plutonium. The Russian and U.S., it's about 4. The IEA assumes 8. So we have a legacy, and the gray material here is material which has been declared excess for weapons by the U.S. and Russia. But we have the legacy also from the dream of plutonium breeder reactors, this green plutonium, which has been separated from power reactor fuel. Now, what's to be done with this, given that there are no breeder reactors to be started with this separated plutonium? Well, the plan is to recycle it into the fuel of light water reactors in most cases. Russia and India are still planning on breeder reactors, and they're saving it for breeder reactors. So we have then 2 fuel cycles in the world today. One is the U.S. fuel cycle, and there's many other countries, where basically spent fuel is stored. And the other one is the one which has been promoted by France, especially where you take the spent fuel, you take it to a reprocessing plant, and you separate the plutonium and uranium, you recycle it, and then it comes back in France, which has gone the furthest down the track. Then the spent so-called mixed oxide fuel, the mixed plutonium uranium oxide fuel, is stored at the reprocessing plant. And Japan has been planning to go down this same track as France, and it has built a reprocessing plant, and it was supposed to start operating in 1997. It has not still started operating. Now, as part of its review, of the Japan Atomic Energy Commission's review of this issue, they estimated that this reprocessing, building this reprocessing plant, operating it for 40 years, and then decommissioning the reprocessing plant will increase electric power costs in Japan by more than $125 billion, about the same as the total savings that Dr. Sukawara was the 17 trillion yen total savings of the private savings in Japan that he mentioned. So that it will increase the cost of electric power in Japan by that amount over the alternative of not reprocessing. So that's an argument for not reprocessing. The alternative is to store the spent fuel and pending either placing it underground, as the U.S. Intends to do, or maybe sometime in the future, if reactors are commercialized, reprocessing it then. This is a picture of a storage facility which is being built in Amori Prefecture near Mutsu. Because the reprocessing plant hasn't been operating, they need extra storage. This facility will cost about $2 billion. And if you made 10 or 11 of these facilities, enough to accommodate the total planned lifetime throughput of the Rakasha reprocessing plant that I just showed you, it would cost about $25 billion. So much less costly than the reprocessing. Now, in fact, the interim spent fuel storage, after the pools are filled up in dry casks, is a standard approach today for managing spent fuel pending final disposition. This is the way we do it in the U.S. We don't even have it inside a building; we just have it outside. In Germany, as in Japan, it's put inside a shielding building which provides extra protection. Japan had a little of this storage, and in fact, at Fukushima Daiichi, some spent fuel was stored in dry casks. And you didn't hear about it because there was no concern about its safety. This is before the tsunami and after the tsunami, and the only difference is a little seaweed on the casks after the tsunami. Germany, it's being stored, at most countries it's being stored at the reactor sites. In Germany, after they decided to abandon reprocessing, they were sending their spent fuel to France and the UK. They decided they had to make arrangements for on-site storage, and this is a picture from a very small site where they didn't have the space for even building a storage, so they built tunnels, and you see the first spent fuel there in the tunnels underneath the power plant. Now this is not just as an alternative to reprocessing, but also the situation as the world learned in the Fukushima Daiichi accident. The storage of spent fuel is not necessarily in pools is not necessarily safe, and in fact we've made it more dangerous than it needs to be because it was originally planned that the fuel would only spend a few years at the pools cooling before being shipped to a reprocessing plant. And so the storage was originally, the pools were racked like that, open racking, with the fuel assemblies spaced out. But then when when there was no place to ship the spent fuel to, the utility companies tried to save money by increasing the storage capacity of the spent fuel pools. And they adopted what we call dense racking. And this is what it looks like. Because basically the spent fuel assemblies would be packed as densely, almost as densely as a reactor core. But if they're packed so densely, you worry about them going critical. And so they have to put a box around each fuel assembly with neutron absorbers in the walls to prevent that densely packed fuel from going critical. But that makes the cooling of it very more difficult if in fact the water is lost. This has been a debate in the United States for the last 10 years about whether we should go from this type of storage to that, back to that type of storage to increase the safety of our spent fuel pools. Utilities are resisting because it would cost several $billions. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has told the utilities that they don't have to do it as long as they have extra ways of cooling the sprays and things like that to cool the pools if there is a loss of water. This is, Japan too has dense packed storage. This is a picture actually of in 2002 from above of one of the spent fuels at Fukushima Daiichi plant. So to get back to reprocessing, this is my last slide. Most countries are moving away from reprocessing. There are 30 countries with operating nuclear power plants in the world, or 31, I forget. And I've organized them here into 3 columns. These are countries which have never reprocessed. In the case of US, I say since 1972. We did have a reprocessing plant that operated for a few years at the end of the 1960s and early 70s, and then it was declared bankrupt. It was a privately owned and has become a government cleanup project, which still goes on, a very costly project. These are countries which were customer countries for reprocessing. France, UK, and Soviet Union, now Russia, offered reprocessing services to other countries. And these were all customer countries, which then, including Japan, Japan's not there because it's in another column, but Japan was also a customer country for a long time, and they did not renew their contracts. In the case of Japan, they decided to reprocess at home. In the other case, the countries decided to go to spent fuel storage. The reason, that they did that in the case of the customers of France and UK was it was very costly, but also it didn't solve their spent fuel problems, because the contract said that the high-level waste would be sent back to the customer, and the countries did not find it any easier politically or technically to deal with the high-level waste from reprocessing than the spent fuel. Now, the final column shows the countries which are still reprocessing, including 2 countries which are in the customer category. The Netherlands, which has a small nuclear power plant and has been continued to send its spent fuel, renewed its contract with France, and Ukraine, which is sending a small amount of spent fuel still to Russia. It renewed its contract under the new government. I show but it looks like they are going to phase that out as well. And I mentioned already that the UK has decided to end reprocessing. And so we are down to a fairly small list of countries. China has just built a small pilot reprocessing plant. It's debating whether to buy a large one. It's tentatively decided not to buy a large reprocessing plant from France because it's so expensive. But it planned otherwise. It has been assuming really France was China's tutor with regard to nuclear energy, and France said this is the way you should do it, and so they have been going down that track. But now I think there's a little bit of a debate has started in China. France, as I mentioned, is the chief promoter of reprocessing, but it's not uncontroversial domestically, and it may become more controversial if a socialist green coalition wins. India is seized of the breeder dream still, and so it will not abandon reprocessing soon. Japan, we've talked about. Russia also has a small reprocessing plant, and which is quite old now. They're planning on building another small reprocessing plant. They still are planning for breeder reactors to be commercialized. So that's the situation. And in January I was in Tokyo and gave very similar talks to this one a number of times, including to two groups of Diet members, to help to give this foreign perspective on Japan's for Japan's current policy-making debate over the future of its nuclear fuel cycle in the context of the larger debate over the future of nuclear power in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.